Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings 2021 quarterback rankings and tiers. We're going to do this from the perspective of a one quarterback league, but we will talk about 2 QB leagues and Superflex once we get down to the very bottom of the quarterback rankings and good second quarterbacks to target. Remember to smash the like button for the video. In the comment section, please, you tell me which lower ranked quarterback has the best potential to be a top 5 or top 10 quarterback this season on your fantasy team. Remember to subscribe to the Mayo Media Network for all of not only your NFL season-long fantasy football needs, your DraftKings needs, your gambling needs, and all of the other sports that go along with it. Spread the wealth around. Tell the people about Mayo Media Network. And hey, here's some incentive for you too. You want to get into a draw for cash giveaways? It was at $500. There's already been so many reviews. It's bumped up to $1,000 of cash giveaways. All you need to do is hit the description or the comment section. You will see the link on Apple Podcasts for the brand new show on Mayo Media Network, Fantasy Football Picks and Bets. If you just leave a 5-star Apple review on there, something you enjoy about the show, you can make it up for all I care and leave your Twitter handle or email address so I can contact you if you're a winner. It takes around 28 seconds to do, and then you're in that draw to win a share of that $1,000. We get even more reviews. That prize pool is going up, so please hit the description and go do that now. And I need to tell you all about runthesims.com. All of the tools that you need, projections, optimizer, game simulations, fully customizable. No one's selling you picks on the site. No one is selling you content on the site. What we are selling is the ability to manipulate these high-end tools any way that you deem fit. So go check out runthesims.com right now. You go to runthesims.com/mail and you'll get a discount. You can find that down in the description as well. It is the best way to do all of your research. And if you're just in the season-long fantasy football game, don't give a shit about daily fantasy or betting, all the season-long stuff is going to be free all season long. So you just go sign up for a free account at Run the Sims right now, and you can still manipulate the season-long projections and use the Advanced Stats Hub any way that you deem fit. So please go check that out, runthesims.com right now. You missed any of the other ranking shows? Hit the description. They're all down there. The list, the debate shows, how we got to settle on these rankings. We got to do quarterbacks right now. Joining me to break it down from ftnfantasy.com, where if you use code Meaney, you get yourself a discount. It's Chris Meaney. What's up?
What's up, brother? It's good to catch up with you, even though we were able to catch up last week. And I didn't have a chance to ask you about Cabot. Like, if you had, I'm assuming you had a phenomenal time golfing with Cuss.
Yes. If anyone wants to go play the number 1 and number 6 rated courses in Canada and have like a full like Irish links style game under their belt. I didn't play well, but I thoroughly enjoyed my experience. We will have to head up next year sometime. Maybe we'll have a Mayo Media Network company trip up, and I'll shell out the $400 around.
How windy was it?
It was 35 miles per hour the first day and 40 miles per hour the second day.
So pretty windy.
Yeah,
pretty windy.
It's funny. I thought I was massively sunburned at one point. I did get sunburned, but I had a massive wind burn for like 2 days. It was ridiculous. I was like, it doesn't feel hot. And it was like bright, like it wasn't like, it didn't look like a sunburn. It was so red. It was like lobster red. And I just don't get that red.
It's on my bucket list, so I'm going to check it out now that I'm on the East Coast again. It will be something that I'll be doing next year for sure. Super jelly that you got to do that, but thrilled to be able to talk fantasy football quarterbacks with you. We're so close, man, to week 1 of the NFL season. So let's do this.
If you missed Meaney and I breaking down the DraftKings first look pricing for week 1, that's when it all became real to me, Meaney. When the prices dropped, I was like, oh, we're here. This is happening. Let's go. You can go check that out on Mayo Media Network and on the podcast feed. If you just would like to walk around and listen to this, go subscribe on Apple Podcasts to the Pat Mayo Experience. Leave the rating and review for that one, too. There's no cash giveaway for it, but if you want to be nice, you could help Meaney and I out when you go do that. Tier 1 of quarterbacks this year. So I have a group of 5, but we can chop this up a little bit. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott. That is my top 5 at running back. Should they all be on the same tier? Or are like Mahomes and Lamar like a little mini tier above them, then it's the other 3? Or would you package them all in the same one?
I think I would package them all in the same one. It's almost like a 1A, 1B. I would honestly have Allen with Mahomes. It's like 1A. And then like a 1B would be Kyler, Lamar, and I'm willing to put Dak in there as well, just considering what he did last year, even though according to reports, he's dealing with something with his shoulder and he could be sidelined for a few weeks, but I don't think it's significant. Maybe they're just being cautious with him, but we most likely won't see him at all in any preseason games. But just considering what he did last year, and the defense didn't really improve, and he's got a lot of weapons there inside that offense. I mean, he put up, I know it was a very small sample size, Pat, in 5 games, but he put up historic numbers. Will he run around as much as these guys? Maybe not, but he certainly can. And Mahomes may not run around as much either, but it's a revamped offensive line, and it's Patrick Mahomes. And, arguably the two best, the best wide receiver and the best tight end that he's going to be able to throw footballs to all year long. So I think that they should be all grouped together. I typically wait on quarterbacks, but I feel like this year has changed for me a little bit. Now, I'm not rushing to grab 5 of these guys or one of the 5, but I would be pretty happy if I left with one of the 5. And I know we're talking single quarterbacks, but in the Superflex, I think it's very valuable to have one of those 5 quarterbacks on your roster, and I would address it pretty early. But 1A with Mahomes and Allen, and then 1B. But, I mean, geez, I think this is the first time in a long time, Pat, I can't remember, where a lot of these, as many quarterbacks as there are in one tier, usually it's just like, Mahomes and Lamar, in years past, Rodgers and one others. But I think we can put them all in a first tier here.
I may have gotten aggressive with my projections on Lamar Jackson. I currently have him ranked as quarterback number 2, and in my projections, he actually comes out as quarterback number 2 as well. Now, I'm pretty sure Cust is going to pick him to win MVP, and he's all in on the Ravens, so maybe avoid Lamar Jackson. However, when I look at it, it's funny because we talked about the rushing with Mahomes. I have him projected for 280 rushing yards, and that still puts him by far quarterback number 1. And that's only with just under 40 touchdown passes in 17 games if he plays everything. But the biggest thing for me right now is like Lamar I have at 895 rushing yards, which is, I don't think that's unreasonable. He's done it before, and that's slightly less than you would see, but he has to play the full complement of games. I do think that the Ravens are improved, especially offensively this year. So it just comes down to his passing numbers. Can he be efficient enough in the passing game to get to around 4,000 yards, to get around 30 touchdowns? And I think that he can do that. And if he does, and the rushing stays the same, then I think he's the one you want to have, particularly because he's being drafted as quarterback number 5 right now. Even just over the past week in high stakes leagues, that's where he's really settled throughout the course of the year. He's going just a slot after Dak Prescott in the low 40s. You can get him at like pick 50, which at the end of the 4th round, where I think that he has game-breaking upside, where he could regain his crown as quarterback number 1. And that's not a diss to Kyler or Josh Allen or Dak Prescott. Like, Dak Prescott's pretty firmly in 5th for me of those 4, but I think he deserves to be in that tier. That I think any one of those 4 guys has a very reasonable path to quarterback number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you there. Dak is 5 for me, and Lamar does feel like that value inside this tier. And even over the past couple of weeks in high stakes leagues, NFFC drafts, he's got an ADP of 50, and his max pick is 68. That's pretty solid for a guy who can give you that rushing floor. I think those projections are fair as well. And just looking at Lamar over the past few years, I mean, since he took that starting job, only 4 times he's finished with fewer than 16 fantasy points as a guy that's had over 20 and 20 of the 30. So he just comes with a solid floor. And the questions that I think a lot of people have that you brought up as well, and I have, is just the passing attack, right? They were dead last in just passing yards, and their wide receiver core was dead last as well. But you add Rashad Bateman to there, and the steps forward that I thought Hollywood Brown took last year. At the first half of the season was brutal. I mean, you didn't want to roster this guy. He was hanging around waiver wires. People were cutting him. But in the second half, he started to be a little bit more productive in the offense. And you still have some decent players in there as well who can catch balls. J.K. Dobbins, I think, is a really good running back that I think will be more involved in the offense through the air. So Lamar, I mean, again, he's just a couple years removed from that MVP season and lighting the world on fire, and a bit of a down year for him last year. COVID ran through the team, injuries. There was one game against the Browns that stand out where he left and he came back and he balled out towards the end of the game. So I have no problem with Lamar. Wouldn't be shocked if he finished as QB1. And to your point, he's kind of that value where if you want that first tier, you could wait, for the first 4 to come off the board. and then get Lamar.
So one of the big things that I've been looking at is season-long prop. So on the other show on Mayo Media Network, which I got people to subscribe to, but you can go check out the video version as well. Fantasy football picks and bets. I'm on it sometimes. There's a rotating cast of hosts talking about different things, but we've been really hammering down because the title sponsor is PrizePicks.com, that they have these season over/under fantasy props that are out right now. Lamar's rushing one is 950.5, which I think that's just a complete stay away. I could see him going over. I don't want to, lay any money on him going over that. But I was looking at his passing one, and it's 3,450 yards. That seems super low. It's like the lowest of all qualified quarterbacks right now. So if you did want to get on Prize Picks and try to tackle some of these, because I do think that there's some value on it, hit the comment section or description. There's the link down there, or just use code MMN when you sign up, and you'll get a deposit match for up to $100. And there's some really juicy ones, like 3,450.5 yards for Lamar Jackson passing over 17 games. Now, if he gets hurt, he's not going to get there. But even if he's like not good this year, I still think he gets over that number.
Yeah, I think so. 2,700 last year, but again, it was just a weird season for a lot of the Ravens last year. And again, you bring in Bateman, and Mark Andrews is talking up
Sammy
Hollywood
Watkins?
Brown here in camp. Sammy Watkins. Yeah, so they really did a good job of revamping here. And I think they realized that they can't just play against, they finally got by the Titans last year, but the year before that. And then that you're going to have to go through KC to win a Super Bowl here. And you're not going to be able to score 17 to 20 points against KC and beat that team. You're going to have to throw the football. You need to have some playmakers inside that offense. And 900, and I think that whatever you said, 900 and something there for rushing yards. He's had 1,000 in back-to-back campaigns, and whether he throws the football a little bit more and scales it back from a running standpoint, I still think that's a number that he goes over. I got him for 921, so I think that would be slightly under the prop that you gave, but that's me being slightly conservative as well as a guy that has 2,200 rushing yards over the last 2 years. So yeah, Sammy Watkins, it's not like a guy that you need to draft in fantasy, but when he's healthy, he can make things happen as well. And it's just another player that the defense has to take attention to, because this just wasn't the case last year with the Browns. And now they got some pass catchers in there. I think they're one of the most improved teams on offense. I really like Bateman as a player. I think he's going to be very productive inside this offense.
Yeah, so it's going to be Lamar for me from the top, although the Ander curse can strike at any time. Now, I realize that Lamar only threw for 2,750 yards last year. That was in 15 games, and now theoretically he would get 2 more games if he plays the entire season. But you kind of hit on it. To compete with these very top teams in the AFC, like, they do have to modify their offense a little bit to become a little bit more pass-heavy. And the one really underrated part of the Ravens' offense last year, it's not underrated, just underspoken about, is how many drops they had.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, that's part of Hollywood, right? He just struggled so much in the first half of the season with targets. There was a point in the season where, I don't know if this is an exact quote, but just trade me. Why am I here? Why am I part of this offense if you're not going to use me? And in the second half, they started using him, and he dealt with some foot injuries right away in his first season. So he was in and out of the lineup, and all reports indicate that he is healthy right now. And we all know that he's a big play. He's got big playability to him, and he's very explosive after the catch. So you get him another year inside this offense, Lamar heading into year 4. And again, all those weapons that they brought in through the draft or through free agency. So that's a very low number. I believe last year, Willie Snead led this team in catches. It's just it's that's laughable. Now, when you consider what they have on their squad now, and Willie Snead's not going to be a part of the offense, really. So.
It's true. Do you have a preference between Allen and Kyler? Because do you think that we see more Kyler from the second half of last year, where he was not as valuable as a fantasy quarterback after the injury, and he stopped running as much, stopped calling his own number near the goal line as much? Then you have someone like Josh Allen, who continues to call his number around the goal line. But if that regresses at all, then it becomes kind of concerning for his overall fantasy value. He might end up becoming a better real life quarterback because of it. But selfish Josh Allen on the 1-yard line is who I want to draft in fantasy.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I have a preference, and it's Allen. It's close. I'm a huge Kyler fan, and before he suffered that shoulder injury against the Seahawks, I believe it was week 8, he was QB1. and he was third among quarterbacks in red zone rushing attempts. And Kenyon Drake was not part of the red zone offense. Like anybody who owned Drake in the first few weeks of the season, where they were pulling their hair out because it was always Kyler, and he was being selfish. And why wouldn't you when you're so agile and you can get in with ease? Like there's difference, right? There's Allen just runs over people when at the one it's going to be him. But for Kyler, when he suffered that shoulder injury, Pat, he had one red zone carry in the second half of the season, and Kenyon Drake led all running backs in red zone rushing attempts. So there was a change, and it was just because of Kyler's shoulder. And reports out of camp in Arizona say, and for Kyler, he's been on record to say this too, that he's going to be a little bit cautious and maybe not be as quote unquote selfish running the football inside the red zone. And I don't think he was being selfish, but it's protecting himself. He's a bit of a smaller quarterback. I thought he adjusted from just the past couple years and taking sacks. Like a couple years ago, he was taking needless sacks and he was running around a little bit. Last year was a bit better for him, not taking those hits and maybe not running around as much, adding AJ Green, whatever, but they still added him. And then Rondale Moore that they drafted as well, who can play in the slot. And then of course they still have Hopkins and Connor who can catch balls into the backfield. So there's a lot of solid pieces inside that offense. And I don't think the same can be said with the Bills. I have some questions about Cole Beasley, where his head's at, and Diggs is definitely the guy. But we have a large sample here of Josh Allen, to your point, calling his own number inside the red zone. And this is a team that doesn't seem like they really want to run the football all that much. They didn't last year. In the playoffs, I think they ran it once in the first half of a playoff game. Allen's not afraid to run. He's had a ton of rushing touchdowns over the course of his career. So I lean with Allen, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. I guess Emmanuel Sanders is there now too. Maybe Gabe Davis takes the step up in a year or two.
I think he does.
But we're both firmly on. I mean, Dak is in this tier, but he's the last guy of this tier.
Yeah, he should be there, right? Considering all the weapons and the offensive line is healthier. This year, it went through some issues, and he was setting the world on fire. I mean, he was going to blow past every single prop that he had, touchdowns, passing yards, and he was on pace for an historic season. Now, sure, there may have been some regression a little bit, but I just think if he's healthy, I mean, with his weapons, I really like CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper. Michael Gallup is a deep threat guy. I think a bounce back here from Zeke. So I think he does belong in that tier, but he is firmly number 6 for me. And we'll keep an eye on what happens if he can get in there and throw some footballs. He may even fall down. We're seeing Aaron Rodgers jump up here now that he's reported to camp. So people like Justin Herbert. So he could potentially fall outside that 5. And I think that'd be a pretty good quarterback if you're able to get him at 6 or 7 or 8. He's in there for me.
Yeah, let's discuss this QB strategy when it comes to drafting for both single quarterback and then 2 QB and Superflex. Do you really see a big difference in your draft strategy between 2 quarterback leagues and Superflex leagues? Because I don't. I just treat Superflex like it is a 2 quarterback league.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I treat it the same, but in a 2 quarterback Superflex, it's the same. But I want one early, man. I really do. I'm probably leaving with 4, 3 for sure. And I want 2 of them probably before the end of the 4th. And I'm definitely taking one. Like if I had a pick in the 5, 6, 7, 8 range, I'm most likely taking a quarterback in that range. And near the end of the 1st, I'm taking one there. And then by the time it comes back to you, there's still going to be some decent quarterbacks, but I think you have to address it then as well. You probably should leave, with 2 in the first 4 rounds. I've been in situations before, Pat, where injuries pile up and people are hogging quarterbacks and it's tough to find anyone. You put yourself in a really tough position if you don't have 2 capable quarterbacks.
Yeah, most of the leagues that I've ever won in Superflex or 2 quarterback, I usually have 2 in the first 3 rounds. I try to go get 2. If I don't get the very top guy, I guess it depends on where you pick. Like if you had the number 1 pick, would you take Mahomes or would you take McCaffrey?
I would probably take McCaffrey, but it would put yourself, I've been in that situation where I'm 2 or 3 and I have Mahomes at 2 and I've seen the quarterbacks by the time it comes back around, all the top 10 are gone and most likely the top 12 are gone. So if you were to take CMC, then you're looking at a quarterback outside the 12 like Stafford, which I guess is okay, would be maybe the best that you can do at QB1. I think it'd be fine if you got a Hurts or a Tannehill, but after that, like if you don't go QB with pick 2 and 3, then you're taking shots at like a Baker Mayfield or one of the younger quarterbacks here, like a Trey Lance or a Fields, which I'm fine with. but it's something that you have to play this out, whether it's a mock draft or not. Like I would consider Mahomes at 1, but I think that I would go CMC, but pick 3, 4, and 5, I'm going quarterback.
I think picks, the second round and third round, like the best I think that you could probably do in a 12-team league at the turn in a Superflex at pick 24 and 25, like maybe Joe Burrow is still there. Like that's your best case, or Hurts potentially.
That'd be a win. That would be a win, but it's also possible that those guys wouldn't be there. And then I think you're like, oh my goodness, wow, is my quarterback 1 here, Trevor Lawrence, Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins? Like, do you want to even pick them at that point? It feels like a bit of a waste, but that's why I think you need to address it certainly in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, and then people start reaching on these sort of sub-tier quarterbacks.
Exactly.
Like they start going in rounds 4 and 5, the Bakers of the world, the Drew Lock, Sam Darnold, like that tier of guys. Even Tua to a certain extent could be down there. Kirk Cousins, like they're fine as your quarterback too. And obviously the opportunity cost of passing on a quarterback very highly is going to be that you get Alvin Kamara in the first round, or someone that normally like Devontae Adams at like the beginning of the third or something like that, because everyone's loading up on quarterbacks. Like that could work out to your favor, but then you have to hit. The one thing about quarterbacks and taking them early, at least to me, into quarterbacks or Superflex formats is unless they get hurt, quarterbacks are generally the safest players on the board. So you know the commodity that you're getting. So if you can get 2 top 10 guys, it really can give you a huge advantage instead of you having to be right about that guy that no one else wants to have.
Exactly. And the game has changed, right? It's just a rushing quarterback world now. You're seeing some of the guys that I mentioned in Fields and Lance get drafted, and some of the guys that have just been drafted over the past couple of years. I mean, Dak led everybody with 26.9 fantasy points, Mahomes 25, Allen 24, Rodgers had the historic season, and it really was a historic season. I mean, a 9.1 touchdown percentage is absolutely historic, and 48 touchdowns. I don't expect him to do that. He's like kind of the outlier where him and Brady average more than 20 fantasy points per game, but they don't give you that rushing floor. But they also have some dud games in them where it's these other guys that have the safe floor. Kyler, 23 fantasy points per game. Watson, of course, there's a lot of question marks with him, but he can run around 23 fantasy points. Herbert, Tannehill. And then there's a bit of a drop off. After that, we're looking at guys, you mentioned Baker, Matt Ryan's in here, Kirk Cousins is guys that average like 17 fantasy points per game, like 7. That's a 5 to 7 point difference in terms of that tier to the guys that you would get in the 3rd or 4th round if you don't address the quarterback position in the first 2 rounds. So that's a significant difference in my opinion. I think it's very valuable in a super flex league to have a rushing quarterback. And heck, if you start with a Mahomes or a Lamar and you're able to get a guy like Fields, Trey Lance, or Hurts, that's huge. I think you're ahead of the game.
So I think the best strategy that you can look at, assuming this isn't like a best ball format, it's like a real league where you can make trades. If you can get Mahomes, I would take him at pick number 1. I just would. And then I would probably load up on someone at the swing after pick 1 of whoever the best quarterback remaining was. And then I would go get myself, probably in order, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Tua, Zach Wilson, Daniel Jones, one of those guys in like the 9th, 10th, or 11th, which is where they're probably going to go in 2 quarterback kind of thing, because they're not, unless they get announced to be a starter by the time this comes out, or over the next few weeks whenever you draft. But if they're not the starters, that's where I would go, because the rest of my team is deficient at that point, and I have Mahomes in a 2 quarterback league as a bargaining chip. But then Fields comes out, and like you mentioned, you have this higher floor because of the rushing quarterback, and maybe all of a sudden like he's like the 8th best quarterback or something. Well, then I can trade Mahomes for Christian McCaffrey. Like that wouldn't be that hard of a sell to do to someone in your league. Or if you need receivers, you go get 2 receivers for your quarterback, or a running back and receiver. Wherever your team is weak, I just think there's a lot of value in these rookie or even second year underdrafted rushing quarterbacks that you can make your 3rd quarterback that you don't need to rely on. But if the time comes where they have proven themselves to be safe with high upside, you can get rid of your super high established quarterback and get some real value in return for them at the same time. That would be the best draft strategy that I could think of, and that's the one that I've employed the most often. It's funny because I have more success in 2 quarterback leagues than I do in single quarterback leagues.
Yeah, me too, actually. There's one year that stands out to me. I think it was last year where I lost Dak and I lost Wentz, and I think I may have had Haskins as my 3rd, and it's like, oh boy, like I actually went to the fantasy playoffs, and I'm starting Nick Mullins in a 2 quarterback league, and I lose, because you're not injuries happen, of course, but you want to be prepared towards the end. Those are two guys in Lance and Fields that are really moving up single quarterback leagues in NFFC. I've noticed the jump. They're both going now inside the top 20. And if either of these guys are named starters, they're going to go inside the top 15. And you just have to view them the same way I think people are viewing Jalen Hurts right now. Jalen Hurts, a very small sample, questions about him as a passer, but his rushing floor is there. And Pat, when he was playing those 4 games, what did he start 4 games? I think his fewest fantasy point output in those 4 games was 16 fantasy points for a guy that was playing behind a brutal offensive line and not throwing the football to anybody. So you have to view Lance and Fields as guys that, not that you have to reach on them, but maybe you start thinking about them at quarterback 15 or quarterback 14, just to have them, because when you think ahead, let's say they don't play the first few weeks and it is Dalton and Jimmy Garoppolo, they're going to get in over time. There's no question. Both of them will. And when they are starters, you're going to be ranking them week in, week out as a borderline top 10 quarterback. I'm going to be doing the same. People are viewing Jalen Hurts like that. They viewed him last year. He was, at one point, he was quarterback 5. Why? Because he runs around. So these guys that you're getting towards the end, I'm looking at the NFFC right now, ADP 145, quarterback 18 for Lance. Fields 148, quarterback 20 for, quarterback 20, pick 148. Again, those are guys that you're drafting is just like your second quarterback. And when it comes to them being starters, they're going to have top 5 upside on a weekly basis because of what they can provide on the ground. So I think that's a great strategy. And when you think too, like, okay, I don't want to waste a pick on Mahomes and then, or have another quarterback in round 3. I don't want to have those. A lot of people are going to be doing that too. So the running backs are not going to fly off the board like they do in a single quarterback league. You're still going to have solid running backs if you pick one in round 2 or one in round 4 or 5.
Yeah, you might not have the best running backs there are in this league, but you can still get that like tier 2, tier 3 type guy and have to live with that. But your quarterbacks are your highest scoring players, so you might as well prioritize them. In a single quarterback league, it's not as important because the gap between like 1 and 12, I mean, it's large, but it's not huge. But the difference between like 12 and 28 when it comes down to it is a massive gap. And I for the record, I would want Justin Fields more than I would want Trey Lance. I just think that his path to playing is probably going to be faster. And that's not to say that Lance can't win the job from Jimmy Garoppolo week 1. But the Niners schedule is so easy that it's going to be pretty simple if Jimmy G gets the start to be. And Levy and I talked about this a few weeks back on the show that he could just be 5-1 and they're not going to bench a 5-1 quarterback.
I know. I've had this conversation with Elliot as well. I mean, Elliot had said that he expects Lance to be the starter week 1, and Kyle Shanahan said just recently that it's Jimmy G week 1. I don't fully believe him, but to your point, the schedule is super soft right away. And that's why part of it for me feels like this is a perfect time to just go with Lance week 1 in Detroit, week 2 in Philadelphia, 2 very winnable games. But if Jimmy G, and you would expect them to win both games, even if it is Garoppolo week 1 and week 2, you're right. And then you have some tougher competition where you play Seattle and Green Bay, I think, in the first few weeks. And if they win those games, then at that point, you're just riding with Jimmy Garoppolo, and then Lance is kind of hanging around, on your bench, and it could be frustrating. But I like both of them. I think they're both going to start this season, and I do feel like Lance has a higher ceiling just because of some of his pass catchers and the play calling. I just trust Shanahan more than I trust Matt Nagy. But even still, like both of these guys, I'd rather have them as my QB2 than a guy like Carson Wentz or a Baker Mayfield or
Goff or
Fitzpatrick. Like I like Fitz just like everybody else likes Fitz, but he's going to have those games where he has single fantasy points. And if Hurts or if Lance and Fields have a game where they just have one passing touchdown, but they run for 40 or 50 yards, it's like, okay, fine. I got double-digit fantasy points here. That's the floor that I have. There was a game last year where Brady threw and he had 2 fantasy points. Like those games are going to happen with guys like Baker and Wentz and Tua and Fitzpatrick. They're just going to happen, but you get that rushing floor. It's very solid. So those guys are going to continue, I think, to jump. I mean, just 3 weeks ago, Pat, Fields and Lance were going outside the top 22. Like people are catching on to them and they want a piece of them, and I don't blame them.
Yeah, the bottom tier of guys like this that we're talking about are probably Zach Wilson and Daniel Jones, because they could be good. It's most likely they're probably going to be bad, but they're going to run as well. And if they can click in these offenses and actually establish themselves as passers, I don't think that they're going to run to the same extent that, I think Fields is a pretty good deep ball passer anyway, but if he starts like taking off, like it's game over in terms of fantasy. He's like the better Jalen Hurts at that point. And I would want a part of that. Lance, I don't know what he is as a passer, but I know he can run. So I feel like he's going to run more. That'd be my hesitation on Lance, though, when it came to overall fantasy ability, because with that week schedule, you think, oh, this is gravy. This is going to be great news for these skill position players on the Niners and the quarterbacks. But if they're just up, they're going to be running with running backs most of the time.
Yeah, you're right. They are. And I feel like they'll be up in a majority of their games. I really like their team. And a lot of guys that didn't play last year because of injury are back. And we've seen Shanahan before use multiple running backs and just play the running back game, right? Remember the game against the Packers where Jimmy G maybe had 9 passing attempts? Like if they can run on a team, they're just going to continue to run on a team where, maybe Chicago will be in some tighter games and we'll see a few more passing attempts from Fields. But it's Shanahan and the players that they have in that offense, like all those yak monsters like Kittle and Ayuk and Debo who do get me excited. But yeah, we'll just see how that plays out. But can't you just picture it? If Jimmy G has a preseason game where he throws 5 picks and he looks awful and Lance is playing really good, where do you think he goes? If you're waiting it out in the last week to draft and Lance is named the starter, he's probably a guy that maybe you end up passing on because he's getting drafted in the top 10 and everybody's liking him. I don't think Fields will get to that point. Even if he's named starter, I think he's still going to be a pretty good value on draft day.
Yeah, and I think he probably has the higher fantasy upside year one anyway. It's funny that we didn't talk about Trevor Lawrence at all as a part of this, but we'll get to him in a minute. And when Paul puts the graphic up on the screen with the projection from runthesims.com for Trey Lance this season, it puts him out as quarterback number 14. Those are my inputs that I made him starter from week 1 just to see what that would look like. And that's with me having San Francisco at a 47% rushing rate, which is probably the highest in football right now, and running just a shade over 1,030 plays. But that gives him almost a 20% market share of the rushes, 6 yards per carry, 15% of the rushing touchdowns. And even though he's taking all of the passing attempts, the passing itself just isn't going to make up for it. He would need a better passing season based on what I would put in to crack the top 10. So I do think that there is a bit of a limited upside. Plus, we don't know the actual skill level where he's at. Right. Let's jump back into the tiers, though. So we've done the top 5 guys. This next tier I have has 3 players on it, but I can move this around, add more people, take more people out. It's Russell Wilson, Jalen Hurts, and Joe Burrow are my 6, 7, and 8 at quarterback. Should Justin Herbert be a part of that? Because he's my next guy on the list, but I just feel like Justin Herbert is closer to Trevor Lawrence and Tom Brady and Ryan Tannehill. I don't think he's going to be running for his life in a lot of situations. I actually think the Chargers want him to run less this year. And if the Chargers are a better team this year, he's going to get his numbers for sure. But it's not going to be one of these situations where they're just blowing late game leads or having to play huge catch up against teams. I think he'll be more efficient this year, but I think it might curb his fantasy upside potentially.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a unique tier that you have there, and I can't hate it. You
can listen, Meaney. You don't need to be nice to me just because you're on my show.
No,
you can hate.
I would tell you.
Go ahead and hate.
I would tell you. I think that it's interesting because Brady and Rodgers, to me, should kind of be in that tier, but they don't have that same rushing floor, right? Which we talked about. There's dud games that are going to happen between those two. I think that Hurts. I have Hurts and Burrow kind of in tier 3, but I really like both of those quarterbacks, and it's for my mindset, if I don't get those first 5, I'm probably fading that next tier in terms of ADP where it's Rodgers, Brady,
Wilson.
And then I'm okay, now I'm interested in Herbert, Tannehill, Burrow, and Hurts. That's kind of where I think I'm going to live in that range. But I think those 4 certainly have the upside. I think we could see a bit of a downtick from Justin Herbert, just a little bit here. I think defense is kind of keyed in on him towards the end. I think he's a terrific talent. I think he's going to be amazing in this league, and he was amazing last year, but I still have questions about the offensive line, a new play caller, and I don't think he's going to run around as much as he did, to your point as well. But I don't know, man. I think that I think that I would probably have him just in that third tier. And it's just, we're splitting hairs here a little bit. Hurts, I don't want to draft as like QB6. I just don't want to overpay a little bit on him, but I don't know if we have to. I think we can get him as like QB10 or QB11, but he does have the upside to just be close to that next tier. Herbert is the one that I'm unsure of. He's that one guy that I just don't know. Like QB6 right now, a min pick of 41 over the past couple weeks here in NFFC drafts. I don't think I'm willing to pay that price for a top 60 pick. I don't think I'm there. I think I would rather like a Russell Wilson, new offensive coordinator in town, coming off a season where he had the most passing attempts in his career. And then you're hearing things like Tyler Lockett say he's never seen routes like this in his time in Seattle, and DK Metcalf, very similar, like just routes that he's never ran before and it hadn't been seen in LA. Shane Waldron is coming from Sean McVay type offense, a type tree. Doesn't have a lot of ability. It doesn't have a lot of success or a track record of calling plays. He's never really done it, but he's going to bring a different dynamic to this offense that I'm more willing to grab a guy that's done it before in the past, like a Wilson or a Rodgers, as opposed to a Herbert. I don't know, man. I just don't know I'm a little on the fence when it comes to Herbert, where his draft price is.
I would go Herbert over Rodgers. I think the thing that's going to trigger most people here is like Jalen Hurts at 7, Joe Burrow at 8.
Yes.
And they're on this tier with Russell Wilson, who we consider to be one of the safer fantasy quarterbacks. And I do consider him that way. Maybe he should be a part of the first tier, or him and Dak should be on their own tier. I'm willing to hear those arguments for sure. But one of the things with Hurts and Burrow, they're both going later than a lot of the guys after them. They're going as quarterbacks 11 and 13, respectively, right now in high-stakes NFC drafts. So I think that the value at pick 90 or 100 is a lot better on those guys. And I feel like I'm going to know pretty quickly whether I was right or wrong about them. Like, if Hurts is just bad, then he's going to be bad. But if he's good, he has the potential to be the number 1 overall quarterback. Like, he has that sort of upside based on his profile. And I've said many times on this show, I have Joe Burrow projected to throw the most passes of anyone in football this year. So if we're thinking about, like, volume kings in the passing game, like a Stafford or a Matt Ryan, like guys who have gotten to that level before because of the overall volume, they just get there through attrition. I can see that with Burrow 100%. Plus, he runs more than those guys.
Right. And that's the thing where I have a little bit of pause with Herbert, because last year, 595 passing attempts was the 4th most in football, but the defense should be good. They got a defensive-minded coach there. Are they going to run a little bit more? Is Herbert going to scale back his rushing like you mentioned? And he wasn't even a big runner. 234. Herbert is right there, or Burrow is right there too. If you just take his yards per game on the ground and take that over a full season, he's right around that 230 mark too. So I think the passing attempts probably come down from Herbert. They're in more football games and he's not throwing a lot or as much as he did last year. And I don't know, that's just not going to be the case in Cincinnati. The defense is still pretty bad. And you have the sample last year of the 10 games. The 40.4 passing attempts was just behind Big Ben at 40.5. And Big Ben's always been among the leaders. It's just what it is. He's always a guy that, kind of churns out around 600 in passing attempts. So I love Burrow for where he's going. I don't think it's a stretch where you have him ranked as a tier. And I think people will probably get triggered with Hurts and Burrow in that tier ahead of a Rodgers and a Brady. But again, this is just it's a new age at the quarterback position, and you have all those weapons that Burrow has. And Zach Taylor was certainly fine with just letting Burrow chuck and letting him throw. And Joe Mixon involved in the passing game as well. This is a guy that I expect, if he's healthy, to have 50-plus catches. So you're going to have probably 5 guys inside that offense. Yes, CJ Uzomah as well is a guy that I expect to have 50 catches if Burrow's throwing the ball 40-plus times a game, and a lot of just solid wide receivers in there. So I really like Burrow. I think he's got upside to be close to that next tier as well. So, I can't hate on that tier. It's just, what do you do with a guy like Rodgers and Brady? Do you just fade them because they're getting a little bit older and they were so efficient last year? I think of Brady and I'm like, wow, this guy had 40 passing touchdowns. He was awful to start with Bruce Arians. He was throwing picks. Bruce Arians was throwing him under the bus. He really didn't have any time with the team in camp. It was a different year last year. Now you got year 2, and he's got all of his guys. He's got Brown coming back and Gronk, who he's very familiar with, and now another year of Evans and Godwin, 2 guys that he just was throwing footballs to just last year. So now another year inside this offense, another game. Man, Brady could top 4,600 yards and 40 passing touchdowns. And to me, that's pretty scary.
It is. The reason that I don't like those guys as much is because I perceive them to have a floor. And I feel like Brady probably hit his ceiling last year with 40 touchdown passes. Like, it's going to be really hard to replicate. It's same with Burrow or with Herbert. Like, Herbert had 5 rushing touchdowns last year. Maybe that's just a part of his game, and I am discrediting that, but it's not like he was running all that often. I guess maybe he sees daylight, he goes, and he's there. But it just feels like that number is somewhat unsustainable, too. Like, Dak has put up enough of a resume of having like 5 to 8 rushing touchdowns per year that you just expect him to do that. But even his passing exploits are going to be much higher, even if he does regress from that number. So that's the hesitation with Burrow for me. And I always talk about that I'm playing for the most possible upside within reason at almost every position. And that's what I see from Burrow and Hurts, that if I get this pick right, they're going to outperform wherever I draft them and be better than all of these guys because their ceiling is so much higher. And if they're not good, I can move on in a 1 quarterback league pretty easily to someone else. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to get anyone on the Stafford, Ryan, Rodgers, Brady tier, but I mean, their level isn't that much higher than Kirk Cousins at the same time. So I'm not really going to sweat that. That's why I want to take like home run cuts at the quarterback position if I'm going to go into this area. So that leads me to tier 3. And this is kind of jumbled. I need you to help me make sense of this one. This is the way I have it right now. Herbert, Tannehill, Lawrence, Brady, Stafford, Rodgers, Ryan, Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, Trey Lance, and Tua. That's like its own tier of guys that I could be like, yeah, let's take whoever's last. And I probably want Fields. Or Lawrence.
Yeah, you probably, those two guys. I'll say Tannehill, too. I give some love to Tannehill. I have him ranked as higher than anyone over at FTNFantasy.com. And just looking at, since he was just named a starter, so it was week 7 of 2019. He's quarterback 3 in fantasy since then. Only 2 guys ahead of him. And Patrick Mahomes is not one of them. It's Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. This guy's been super efficient and not really throwing the football. Sneaky little ground game, too, with Ryan Tannehill. And a new addition to the offense in Julio Jones. So I know Arthur Smith is not calling plays anymore, and people are wondering what the offense is going to look like. But you just give yourself a future Hall of Fame wide receiver and a stud on the other side of A.J. Brown and a running back in Derrick Henry, who is, a lot of defenses are still going to focus in on Derrick Henry and what he can do. And that's going to leave some soft coverage for one of these 2 wideouts. And I think that wideout may be Julio, who kind of gets disrespected. It's a really solid 3-headed monster in Tennessee. So Tannehill is that one guy that I still think people don't give him the respect because you just look and sometimes he doesn't throw that much. But again, this is a guy who will call his own number and run. And the rushing touchdowns mean like he had 7 last year. That's probably I would say that doesn't happen again. If he gets 4 or 5, I think you could like that quite a bit. 266 rushing yards is just added on to what he can do. But you look at all the quarterbacks, I mean, 481 passing attempts, that's not even remotely close inside the top 15. So that's I think where people have that hesitation to draft him. But I think I think he belongs in a tier. I would have Tua outside of that tier. I just have some questions, like how much is Tua going to throw the football? I don't know.
I think you're just a Tua hater. You're like everyone else who comes on this show.
I'd like Tua. I just don't know if he belongs in that tier with with all the other guys that you had in there, like Trevor Lawrence or you got Matt Ryan in there. I think Matt Ryan.
Yeah, so it's sort of like the safe. It's sort of like the safe pocket passer guy. Like for reference, I have Tannehill at number 10 at quarterback. Okay. Maybe not quite as high as you, but I feel like that's pretty high.
That's pretty
general.
high. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so it's Herbert, Tannehill, Lawrence, Brady, Stafford, Rodgers, Ryan. Maybe there should be a little line
I'd
there.
Cut it off there.
And then it would be Fields, Daniel Jones, Trey Lance, Tua.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd have Tua in that final one. And I'm not a hater. I'm not, but
I mean, I'm watching clips on Twitter. Tua's throwing 65-yard bombs. They got a little bit of wobble. Kurt Warner-esque, if you ask me, Meaney.
And if his weapons, like if Waddle's not seriously hurt and Fuller is healthy, and Parker is healthy too, sure, he does have the weapons there. The defense is still, I think, solid. that's my one question with like, how many is he going to have a lot of games where he's throwing the ball 40 plus times? Are they going to let that happen with Tua? And again, he doesn't need to be in that tier. He's not really getting drafted there. I think he's a really good value for where he's going. I mean, quarterback 23, ADP 166. Like, that's after Baker and Carson Wentz, who I'd much rather have Tua than those two guys. And Kirk Cousins, I think I'd probably rather have Tua over him too. So again, just because I don't agree with maybe he should be in that tier doesn't mean that he can't get there from an upside standpoint, but somebody that you just don't need to draft in there. But I think Daniel Jones is sneaky as well from a rushing standpoint. The offensive line has some question marks, but I like that they drafted Kenny Golladay and that it looks like Saquon's going to be good to go here this season. But yeah, I mean, again, Tua is just one of those guys that, you could pick up later, like you said, a replacement when you're in a single quarterback league. If you just draft somebody in, I don't know, outside of the top 5 and the injury happens or something doesn't happen, or you draft a second quarterback towards the end, is a guy who does have some ceiling and some upside that maybe you could have yourself, a high end QB2, low end QB1.
Yeah. And listen, if he truly was hampered by the hip last year, and now they actually have an offense that fits him, not Ryan Fitzpatrick, someone that, he's not like whatsoever. Maybe he starts to run a little bit more. Now he's a little bit healthier, and they went out and they got him to legit targets if they can stay healthy. And yes, Fuller's going to miss, what is it, one more game Fuller misses to start the year?
I think so, yeah.
So, and he's already banged up too. So Waddle's already banged up. Devontae Parker's a walking triage unit. So I don't know if they just stay healthy all year. But again, under the assumption that if we're taking some swings, this is going to be very late, that if Tua's good, like his fantasy numbers could be awesome.
They could be. Yeah, there's a couple games that stand out to me. I'm looking at the game log. I do remember the one in Arizona when him and Kyler kind of went back and forth. That was like his big game. I believe it was his second one. He had 248 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and he had 35 rushing yards. He looked really good, and he was dodging tackles. And then there was another game against KC where he had to throw the ball a little bit more. 48 passing attempts was the second most that he had thrown last year. And he finished with 316 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. And again, had a rushing touchdown, 24 rushing touchdowns. He ends up with 3 rushing touchdowns in his final 4 games. Then he plays the Bills week 17 and he threw the ball 58 times. Like,
it was bad.
Really
bad.
Threw 3 picks in that game. But there are some other games too. Like, are they going to let him throw like 15 for 25, 11 for 20, 20 for 26, 17 for 22? That just doesn't do it for me. I know the upside is there and the weapons could, if they all come together and they're healthy. I really do like the Waddle pick. Those guys have a connection as well. I think that's like, if you have a Tua and a Waddle in a dynasty league, like, you're going to be set up, I think, for years to come. But just, I want to see the 40 plus passing attempts. I just don't know if they're going to be there.
That's completely fair. And that's why he's the bottom of tier 4 now. That puts him at quarterback for me, quarterback 19, I think. So it's not like you're going out to draft him.
No.
I do think that as a complementary piece, that if you want to take a shot on him, I do see a path to upside, like I see with Daniel Jones and Trey Lance and Justin Fields. That's sort of the upside tier. Maybe Zach Wilson should be in that tier too. Like, why not, right?
Yeah, maybe he should. We're going to have to see with him. This is a team that I think improved their offensive line. I think personally, they're probably going to have one of the best offensive lines in football, maybe top 5. I think Cleveland probably takes the cake there, but we'll see. A young quarterback who I have high expectations for him, but I think he's going to struggle in year 1. He's a bit of a smaller quarterback, but if you watch him in college, and I know the comparisons may seem crazy when you hear scouts say Patrick Mahomes, but if you really did watch him in college, he had some Patrick Mahomes-like throws, like one leg up in the air, sidearm throws. And I think they did a great job in bringing in Corey Davis and then also drafting Elijah Moore, who I think will just take over at any moment inside the slot. And I really like him as a talent. And the key is for a young quarterback to have an offensive line and to not being, taking all those sacks. And that's a guy who's going pretty much free. Like, him and Sam Darnold, I actually like in that range. Like, I'd rather take those guys than, a Fitz or a Derek Carr or one of the Saints quarterbacks where I'm just not sure, or Jared Goff. Like, Zach Wilson, quarterback 29, like, this guy could be your very last pick. And same sort of deal with Sam Darnold and all of those pass catchers. Just get away from Adam Gase and surround him around playmakers. There's tons of them. He's very familiar with Robbie Anderson. DJ Moore is very explosive after the catch. Terrace Marshall is having great plays here in camp, and CMC can help you out so much as a quarterback. Even if your first read is DJ Moore, not there, CMC. Just get him the ball in space. He is definitely going to have a breakout season, and it doesn't take much for him to have that.
So I'll add Zach Wilson to the bottom of that tier just after Tua in terms of fantasy rankings. Then we talk about tier 5. This is the rest of the quarterbacks. And it's funny because you mentioned Sam Darnold. He is the first of the quarterbacks as a part of this tier. His lack of rushing ability, I think, separates him from that middle tier of the Fields, Jones, Tua's type guys. But he's at the top of this one. And then it's Cousins, Mayfield, Fitzpatrick, Cam Newton, Jameis, Roethlisberger, Tyrod, Derek Carr, Jared Goff, DeShaun Watson, Carson Wentz, who's like dead and can't walk, Mac Jones, Taysom Hill. Like whoever starts for the Saints, I think would get a boost. Although if it's Taysom, he probably gets ranked higher than Jameis, because even if Jameis is the starter, we're still going to see Taysom Hill take like 20% of the quarterback snaps. So that just limits the upside of Jameis Winston. Like no one in here really excites me. And it's no real knock against Goff or Carr and these like steady Eddie going to start every single game. I just don't see any path to upside with them. So it's almost like Kirk Cousins. Like I think Kirk Cousins is a good real life quarterback. I don't love him for fantasy. Like in the games where he's not throwing at least 2 touchdowns, like he's a bad fantasy quarterback. And so are those guys.
Yeah, he is. Cousins is off my radar. I think we'll see a little bit of regression too from Adam Thielen. Like he was just a touchdown beast last year, despite not really getting a ton of targets. Like he wasn't among the leaders in targets.
But their offense is predicated around running picks for him in the red zone. They have a lot more designed plays for Thielen inside the 5-yard line than most. It's like Devontae Adams on the Packers. I know they're 2 completely different receivers, but there are certain play packages in the red zone that just go to Devontae Adams, and they are all set up with pick plays. And Adam Thielen gets that treatment with Minnesota for whatever reason. Now, maybe they're just like, hey, we should just do this with Justin Jefferson. That might work out better. But Thielen, for whatever reason, has these plays designed for him. So I don't know if his touchdown per target is actually out of whack. I think you need to really micro in and see where a lot of these targets are coming from and the play design that's going along with him as well.
Yeah, it's a good point, because when you look at the red zone target shares, he's among the leaders, and he has been, that way for the past couple of years. So it is a good point that you bring up. But for Cousins, I mean, the offense, as good as Justin Jefferson was too, I mean, I think you kind of have to expect a little bit of regression. I mean, 1,400 yards for a rookie has never been done before. I think he's a terrific talent. He's not going to take any defenses by surprise this year, but the offense runs through Dalvin Cook. It's surprising Cook. I know we're talking quarterbacks here, but Dalvin Cook, for a guy who has like at least 40 grabs in each of his last 3 seasons, 3 receiving touchdowns and just 1 in the last 2 years. That would help out Kirk Cousins a little bit more, but the offense does run through Dalvin Cook. But I agree with that tier. There's nothing really all that exciting, to be honest. It's just a lot of quarterbacks that don't chuck. Like Derek Carr, if Gruden would just let him throw the ball a little bit more, and just to anybody other than Darren Waller, like Ruggs, like you drafted Ruggs as the first wide receiver in the top, 11, 12 picks. Like, why don't you throw him the football a little bit? He can take the top off defenses. Maybe that happens with Aguilar no longer there, but it's still just an offense that wants to run the football, and the defense is brutal. Like, you would think that Derek Carr would have more 40-plus passing attempt games. It's just a couple that stand out to me, and it's when the Chiefs, like, went up and down the field twice last year. Vegas almost beat him in both games. They beat him in one, and Carr was good in those games. And it was like, okay, he's actually a decent fantasy quarterback here. When you look at the end of the day, he finishes right around the top 20, but he's just not a guy that you can trust week in and week out.
I would say a special shout out to Teddy Bridgewater. If he somehow wins that job in Denver, he could actually be a nice fantasy, legitimate sleeper, just because no one is paying attention to that offense, because they're like, Drew Lock, he sucks. And like, yeah, he does suck. But Teddy Bridgewater does not. They did give up some capital to go get him. I want to finish this off with DeShaun Watson, though. Obviously, by the time that we're recording this, because we're releasing this a little bit later, maybe he's been traded. Who knows? But probably not. Do you think that he plays this year? Because he's reporting to camp. He's setting himself up to play as long as he doesn't end up on the commissioner's exempt list, which I would say is probably a heavy favorite to happen for him, especially with all the even the new allegations that have come out now against him. So it's a situation where he's basically going undrafted. But if you're in a 1 quarterback league, like, there's no reason, if you're one of the people that likes to take a backup quarterback, like, don't take Carr or Cousins. Like, just draft DeShaun Watson to see what happens. If he's not on a team or not playing by the time week 4 of the preseason, just cut him. Like, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, he's really free in high stakes leagues. Quarterback 28, like Darnold and Carr and Big Ben and Jameis are going ahead of this guy, and is a pick on average 195. Now he has a min of 100, which is higher than some of the guys that are going ahead of him, because I think that's, to your point, why wouldn't I take him near the end of drafts? And if he is starting with the Texans or wherever else, when he's on the football field, he's a top 5 quarterback. I don't think there's any debate in that. He has upside to be QB1. We've seen it week in and week out that he could be a top quarterback for you in fantasy. He can run around. He's really good. I think he does play this year. I think he plays on a different team. I think what will happen, the asking price is super high right now, and there's a lot of uncertainty that you talked about, that when this uncertainty maybe gets a little bit clearer, whether he is suspended for a couple games or whatnot, or maybe an injury happens to somebody, that maybe a team gets a little bit more aggressive. Now, he's been linked to the Eagles. There's a lot of links there. And the Eagles have a bunch of first round picks where they could maybe make that happen and they could flip Hurts. But the asking price of 5 picks and 2 solid NFL players is just a little high for this uncertainty with Watson. But yeah, I mean, free, I would take shots on him in single quarterback leagues. I would take him as my 3rd quarterback in a Superflex league. Why not? Why wouldn't you? And if he doesn't play and he's suspended, you cut him and you pick up the next best thing on the waiver wire, and you know what's going to happen. There's going to be hot players off the waiver wire in the first couple weeks of the season. So he's totally worth the risk.
I think it's more damaging in a 2 quarterback or Superflex league to take him late.
What if he was your 3rd, though?
Even if he was my 3rd, because I do feel like I need that protection. Because at least with Fields and Lance, there's the expectation that they are going to play this year. I do envision a world where Watson doesn't play. That's why in a 1 quarterback league, I'm not really sweating it if he doesn't play. It's like it's not that big of a deal. And and there's always available quarterbacks I can run through if something happened to my main quarterback. Where in that type of league, even the best backups are taken in 2 quarterback leagues in Superflex. That would give me a little bit of pause. I'm not saying that I wouldn't take him. I think he's far riskier in a league like that than a 1 quarterback league, though.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think you're dead on about Teddy Bridgewater too. I've been in this situation in a super flex where I'm looking at my 4th quarterback and they're both just sitting there, and I would rather have Teddy Bridgewater, knowing still that they had said that it's going to be Drew Lock as the starting quarterback, but we know that Drew Lock is just not the answer. They brought in so many weapons inside this offense over the past couple of years, and Jerry Jeudy is so good at separation. There were so many balls that were tossed way over his head and nowhere close. So it's only a matter of time, a couple more games here. Heck, maybe before week 1, they actually realize that, hey, we're just not going to win any football games with him throwing interceptions nonstop. There were games last year where they were in games, Pat, and then those Lock would just chuck it up into triple coverage to Tim Patrick with Jerry Jeudy wide open here on the left side of the football field. So Teddy Bridgewater is a more capable quarterback. He's a smarter quarterback, and he has proved that he could be okay as a fantasy quarterback at times last year with the Panthers and in a small sample size with the Saints. So if you had that decision, you're deciding between 2, and you look in whatever league it is you're drafting, and you see the little note, Drew Lock, number 1 week 1 starter. Don't fall for it. Just take Teddy.
That will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience 2021 quarterback rankings. You can find the whole list in the description, along with the overall top 150 list and show, running back ranking show. This is part 2 of the ranking series. Wide receivers will be next, then we'll be doing tight ends. So stay tuned on Mayo Media Network for that. You might as well subscribe right now. I told you about that giveaway. Do it. Then runthesims.com, all the tools, all the stats that you need to do your own research out there on the internet. But do it at runthesims.com. Meaney, where's the content and where's the show, most importantly?
Yes, FTN, Mean Streets, free show every day, Monday to Friday every day. It is on Game Plus Network. Looking forward to having you on, my friend. But yeah, we stream it from Twitter accounts, and it's up on our FTN YouTube page. And yeah, we're just doing a lot of things. If people are, this is a football show, but if people are looking for, if you're in a fantasy baseball league and you're looking for pickups or playoff schedules towards the end, a free show as well, FTN Fabcast with myself and Matthew Davis. But yeah, lots of FTN coverage over at ftnfantasy.com and ftnbets.com as well. We have a lot of free articles. I know we have some stuff behind the paywall, like some tools and some stats, but use that promo code Meaney, save yourself a bit of a discount. But we do have a lot of, if you're looking for bets, and man, there's just so many right now, and just like season props and future props. And there's a lot of guys Devonta Smith, for example, has a prop of like 700 yards at one book, and other books have him at like 950. So we're doing a good job at FTN at just trying to find value where we can. So
Yeah,
check out
yeah.
FTN.
To get behind that paywall, I can vouch for it. I'm a behind the paywall member at FTN on all 3 other sites. Code Meaney to get yourself that discount as well. And I told you about Prize Picks. They have a couple cool season-long fantasy props up there right now. You can hit the link in the description to go check that out and use code MMN to get a deposit bonus. So if you deposit $100, you'll just get another free $100 to go along with it. So play as many season-long fantasy props as you want. Then we're going to be in season. It'll be great. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Remember to smash the like on the way out. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
That Mayo experience! Experience!